4 agreements. Oh my goodness.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Even our little microphone has a mask.
And I have my own here.
Can't leave the microphone out. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, and to actually physically be here. It's nice to be in this building. It's nice to be within 6 feet of my peeps here, waiting for the time we're all back together.
And can hug.
And can hug, because we all know what that's all about around here. So anyway, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would bet that most of you out there have already read the 4 agreements. I would probably bet that most of you have read it twice.
Yes.
Maybe 3 times.
Yes.
So why am I here being redundant? That's the question of the day. Why? Well, we'll start with a little quiz. You at home, just name the 4 agreements in your head. Don't look it up, don't Google it, just name them. It's not as easy as you think. Our memories aren't as great as they once were. But we almost always, including myself, as I was doing the talk, forget one or another. And now we'll take it even a step further. Are you following the 4 agreements? Are the 4 agreements part of your everyday life? Have you adopted the 4 agreements into how you interact with your life and with your people? So that's what today's all about. It's really about grounding this information. And it's about giving us tools to deal with the chaos of the day. It's about giving us tools to deal with the apparent chaos of the day. It's giving us tools to deal with the apparent separation that is being told to us and sold to us day after day, moment by moment. We're getting powerful messages that we are separate. And the truth is we're not. We're one people. And we have to remember that, but you have to keep your cool in these times or you forget. And I see so many people of goodwill, so many people right now that are very grounded spiritual people that are losing their grounding. So that's why we're revisiting the 4 agreements in an effort to really bring them home and help us all stay grounded during this chaotic time. There's this concept of us and them out there right now. Doesn't matter who us are, doesn't matter who them are. It's just us and them. I mean, think about it. From so many perspectives, there's an us and them mentality. And sadly, I'm hearing and feeling that we've reached a point of a pressure point where we really just can't stand them anymore. We just want them to go away. It's a sad state of affairs, but that's what we've reached because we haven't been listening to one another. So I wrote this silly song to kind of illustrate just how crazy this thinking is. It's called Us and Them. This world would be a much better place if it wasn't for them. Well, they've been ruining things since I can't remember when. Without them, this world would be a much better place. I'm getting really tired of seeing their face. This world would be a much better place if it wasn't for them. Why don't they just give up and admit that I'm right? Why do they always have to put up such a fight? I mean, really, if these people just had half a brain, then maybe they would stop me from going insane. If they would just see things my way, we'd be okay. Well, they sure have a lot of nerve. How could they think I'm wrong? But I will get the final word with this song. This world would be a much better place if it was just us. Then we wouldn't have to put up with all their fuss. And how I wish I had a magic wand. I'd wave it all around and poof, they'd be gone. This world would be a much better place if it was just us. All my Facebook memes would make me happy, and I wouldn't have to fight. And everyone I know would know that I'm right. Sometimes I'll be honest when I sit home late at night. I wonder if everything I believe is really right. Well, maybe they've been trying to help me figure that out. Maybe I just hate them cause I'm scared of my doubt. I wonder if who would help me if it wasn't for them. Suddenly I realize that they are just like me. Stubborn and committed to the world the way they see it. I wonder if at night sometimes they have the same doubts. I wonder if I'm here to help them figure it out. Maybe us and them are really we. Maybe they belong here just like me. Nah. All right, so that is what we're talking about today. Just the idea that it is we. It's not us, it's not them. It's we. And if we haven't figured that out by now, if we haven't found a way to live together by now, then we're simply on our way to a war. Where a war of words turns into a war of actions. And we see it. We see it in the streets, we see it in the world, we see it everywhere. And we really have to take this seriously. We have to take this time to just gather our thoughts. But the big question is, how hard is it to change your mind?
Hard.
Think about that, right? How difficult is it to completely change your mind about something, right? Now ask yourself an even more absurd question. If it's that hard to change your own mind, then how on earth are you going to spend your life changing someone else's mind? Think about that. So what we really have to do is change our minds. And then we have to encourage others to change their minds, so that we're all changing our minds ourselves. We're not being changed by others, because that's just a path of resistance. We're encouraging people to change their own minds, to do their own research, to look into their own hearts, and to follow their own agreements. So let's today look at our agreements. So there's a really nice book. If you haven't read it, it's The Four Agreements. I love the subtitle, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom. We fight for freedom all the time, yet we imprison ourselves. And this is a practical guide to release ourselves of the shackles of our own imprisonment. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. So if you'd advance that slide, please, I'll tell you just a little bit about where this wisdom came from. This is Toltec wisdom. The Toltecs were a culture that ruled Mexico the 10th to 12th century. They were believed to be disciples of Topiltzin, known for performing miracles. They were a very spiritual group, a very peaceful group, and the word Toltec means masters, or in other translations it means wise or wisdom, and they were the predecessors to the Aztecs. So this is ancient wisdom, and it's revised for present day, but it's very, very ancient wisdom, and it applied then, and it applies now. So I'll give you a quick overview, and then we'll dig in. But they're basically saying that everything we do is based on agreements. Everything is based on agreements that we've made with ourselves. We tell ourselves who we are. We tell ourselves how to behave. We tell ourselves what to believe. We tell ourselves what's possible. We tell ourselves what's impossible. We make our own covenant with ourselves. And sometimes we have great agreements with ourselves. And other times, we have to continue to do self-inventory and eliminate some things that just don't help. They don't help us, and they don't help others. We have societally imposed agreements. Think about it, when you're young, society imposes agreements on how a little girl should act, how a little boy should act. And they grow up with that mindset, and all the confusion that causes when people grow up, and they had different ideas about what toys they should be playing with, and they have conflict within themselves because of the agreement that they accepted. And suddenly one day they realize, I accepted agreement that's not valid for me. It was imposed on me. And we all have fear-based agreements. A lot of people are very risk averse. And if they think back along their career or along their life, maybe even their love life, and you look back and you think, wow, if I had the courage to take that risk, I may be in a completely different place right now. So there's a lot of fear-based agreements that we work with too. So this talk is an invitation to do a self-inventory. Examine your own agreements with yourself. And just really think about whether or not they still serve you. And they still serve others. And they may have served you really well as a child. That might have been the perfect agreement for you to manage through maybe a difficult childhood. And sometimes survival has a different agreement energy. And when you move into adulthood and you get to make choices and then you get to thrive as opposed to just survive, you no longer need those survival agreements, those survival instincts. It's time to release them and let go. And on the same topic, just think about how much we teach these agreements to others without even knowing it. As a parent, you do that all day long. As a teacher, you do that all day long. Just as a role model, you do that. Just everyone that passes across the TV screen is teaching us their version of an agreement they've made that they want us to adopt. And it's funny. Nurture has a lot of influence these days. Nature has a lot of influence, obviously, but nurture's having a lot more influence because we're getting communication at lightning speed constantly. And every bit of communication we get has an agenda attached to it. If there's nothing else you remember that. No one is just delivering you information. Everyone is delivering you information with the purpose of influencing you to think and behave a certain way. And I'll share with you a little story. I work in pharmaceutical business. I work for some big pharma companies. You know the names, Pfizer's and Merck's, and that's been my career. So I've been a frontline manager for many years. So there was one particular meeting I had where I wanted to get the slides that they showed us at a national meeting, the PowerPoint slides. And I got a hold of the PowerPoint slides and I started to share them. And what I realized, there was a notes page beneath each slide. And I never thought the same way twice about how information was delivered to me. On each slide, it didn't say what you wanted to communicate. It said, what do you want them to think? And how do you want them to feel? This was just a meeting. And they weren't doing anything subversive. It was just, they understand the power of the presentation, the power of the word. And they understand that if you can make people feel a certain way, you could make people drive in a certain direction. And so never underestimate the power of the agenda that is seeking you as a member of that team. So now we'll move on and we'll look at what the 4 agreements actually are. And for those of you that forgot any of them, here they are now. You got your cheat sheet. Yep. The first one is be impeccable with your word. The next one is don't take anything personally. She's laughing at that one. The next one is don't make assumptions. And then the next one is always do your best. I'm getting all kinds of instructions here. Am I in the right place at the right time here? Okay, very good. So those are the 4 agreements. We're going to dig in now, if you wouldn't mind just advancing the slide to the first agreement. Be impeccable with your word. So I'm going to actually read the text from Don Miguel Ruiz. I realize it's a little bit blurry, so I'll read it to you. I just love this passage. It's amazing when you think about it. The word is pure magic. the most powerful gift we have as humans. And we use it against ourselves. We use the word to create hate between different races, between different people, between families, between nations. We misuse the word so often, and this misuse is how we create and perpetuate the dream of hell. Misuse of the word is how we pull each other down and keep each other in a state of fear and doubt. Because the word is the magic that humans possess, and the misuse of the word is black magic. We're using black magic all the time without even knowing that our word is magic at all. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself. How many out there do that? Anyone? We've only got 4 hands here and they all went up. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. That is what this teaching is all about. The power of the word. Choose words with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or gossip about others. And use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. If you would advance the slide, please. The Toltecs are not the only ones that realized the power of the word. This is Sufi wisdom here, from the ancient Sufis. It's a Muslim culture, I think based out of Pakistan originally, ancient religion. And they had what they called the 4 gates of speech. Before you utter a word, whether verbally or written, it should pass through these 4 gates. The first one, are these words true? The second, are they necessary? There's a lot of true words out there that are not necessary to be spoken, right? Are they beneficial? There are a lot of true words out there that are necessary, but are they going to help? And then finally, are they kind? You could deliver feedback all day long, and if it passes through these 4 gates and people understand your intention is good, then even sometimes difficult feedback. I've managed a team for 30 years. My goal is to provide them feedback. Year-end reviews, coaching reports, feedback on how they handled their sales at meetings, etc. And there's always improvement areas, and there's improvement areas for me to this day. But how you deliver the feedback is how it's received. You have to really think about how you deliver it, and it has to pass through these 4 gates. Now think about your social media feed for a minute. And think about how much you see in communications that don't even get through the first gate. Right out of the gate, it's not even true. Or if it does have a shred of truth, it's so twisted for an agenda. And this is the newspaper business, for example, the headline. The headline is nothing more than clickbait anymore these days. And they find a way to say something. Clickbait. Right? Clickbait. They find a way to say something that gets you interested in it, and usually it's got a negative spin and it appeals to a certain personality type, and they get you into their story. And then when you finally find what they were actually trying to say, it wasn't really anything like that headline at all. And you were like, why did I just waste 10 minutes on this? But worse yet, most people just formulate their opinion from the headline. Oh, there we go. All right, they're doing that again. That's them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there you go. Perpetuates the us, perpetuates the them, and I wish they were just more like me, because I'm actually reading these things and they're just reading headlines, and we start judging, and it just gets all twisted into this huge mess that we've called our modern day. Next slide, please. Now, you can't find anything in any written text, whether it's religious or non-religious, that gives this much power to the word. This is the first line from the Bible. The very first line. It's John chapter 1, verse 1 from creation. And he said, in the beginning was the Word. He didn't say in the beginning was anything else. He said in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was God. Take that in for a minute. And the Word was God. That's it. That's how powerful our Word is. That's right from the Bible. So if that is your book, then think about how you're using your words. You're not going to change anyone else's words. We already agreed on that at the beginning. So how are you going to change the power, the magic of your word? Or the black magic, the unbeknownst black magic of your word. Because words have power. They have energy beneath them. Think about the slogans that you're seeing now on TV, on posters. Think about the slogans out there. They're words. Those words have energy. Those words have meaning. Those words can confuse people because they don't understand necessarily what's meant by those words. So they move into the second agreement, which is, don't take anything personally. Because I get caught up in this myself. I'm a student of this. I'd like to call myself a master at this, but I'm honestly not a master at this. Part of why I'm doing this talk in the first place is to just get myself more grounded in this material. But I can take things personally. Why not? Every third or fourth thing I see on my feed, it's kind of directed at me and my kind, right? Why wouldn't I take that personally? You're basically talking about me most of the time. And everybody else can feel the same way. I'm sure, Andrew, you feel that way. Pamela, you feel that way. There's people that are talking about us, to us, in derogatory terms, all day, every day. And it's hard not to take that personally, right? It really is. But nothing others do is because of you. That's so hard to remember. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality. If we could remember that we live from the inside out, and that to a certain degree, and this is such a weird concept to grasp, but to a certain degree we're just projectors. And the world we live in is the world we project and agree to. It's kind of a strange little quantum physics conversation that I don't even fully get. But it feels right to me. It makes sense to me. When you're immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. This is where we allow ourselves to be victim. Why? If you have buttons and other people push them, the solution is not to get them to stop pushing them. The solution is to get rid of your buttons. Does that make sense, Andrew? You're laughing your head off over there. Pamela's not. Everybody's not. Okay. The solution, I'll say it again, is not to get rid of the people that are pushing buttons. The solution is to get rid of the buttons. So you could push all day, and I just don't care. Your opinion is none of my business. My opinion is my business. And that's hard to remember, and it's especially hard to do, but I'm reminding myself this right now as I remind everyone else. There's a huge amount of freedom that comes to you when you take nothing personally. Remember the title, that this is a practical approach to personal freedom. Nothing can make us freer than getting rid of our buttons. And again, it's not the first time it was said. In the next slide, you'll see this is in the Bible too, in Leviticus. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And it further goes on to say, love your enemy. Right? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we could provide our enemy with that would have more impact than a loving gesture? Think about that. Is there a single thing that would have more impact on our enemy than a loving gesture? Even if that gesture is, even if here's where you're at. I hate you, you hate me, but I'm willing to sit down and hear what you have to say. That's a loving gesture. It's the step you're able to take in that moment, right? Look at what's happened in these. There's been beautiful moments in the protests where the police have gotten down on their knee and said, look, I get it, I hear you, we hear you. What could be better than that kind of loving gesture where instead of I'm your enemy, I'm willing to hear you, or I do hear you, or I'm empathetic with your situation. People just want to be heard. Everything is a cry for love. And at the end of the day, the answer is always somewhere in the middle. It's never on either extreme. It's always somewhere in the middle. The people in the middle are trying to hold this world together. And the people on the extremes are trying to tell us what's wrong. Right? And that's what we're dealing with right now. So, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your gay neighbor. Love your black neighbor. Love your transgender neighbor. Love your white neighbor. Love your Muslim neighbor. It didn't distinguish. This verse didn't distinguish about which neighbor we're talking about. It just said neighbor. We have to infer that meant all the neighbors. Even the ones that we might call them. Right? Another thing that's easier said than done, but it's something to work on, right? It's something for our own personal growth. The next one is a big one. I don't know about you, but I have people in my life that tend to finish my sentences for me. Anybody got one of those? Well, you know, the reason I think, well, yeah, wait a minute. All I said was the reason I think, and now you're assuming everything I was just going to say and responding to it already. Right? There's a lot of assumptions going on. People assume that if you say one thing, then you are firmly in a particular camp. No. I have opinions that are all over the place. I could say one thing that makes you think I'm a complete liberal, and I could say another thing that makes you think I'm a total conservative, because when you're in the middle, you have opinions all across the board. And so don't assume that you know where I land by one opinion I might express or by one thing I might have said. You don't know. You don't typically know the fullness of the story, and you fill in the blanks very, very quickly, because right now there's so much divide going on that it's very easy. If somebody says one little thing, you just throw them in that camp, and now you're going to throw the book at them because they're them. And that's what's happening. Now that's the mechanics of the day-to-day that's turning this thing as ugly as it's getting. So if we just remember, don't make an assumption. Just deal with that particular thing that's being said. And if you want to have a conversation about it, have a conversation about it. Forget the kitchen sink. It doesn't belong there. Forget whatever assumptions you made. But the most powerful thing you could do in any situation when you find yourself making assumptions is ask questions. I learned this as a manager. I would have a rep who is underperforming. And, you know, we're looking for them to make 10 calls a day, let's say, and he's been averaging 7. And I could make all kinds of assumptions about what's going on. But I learned a long time ago that my assumptions were usually wrong, so I stopped doing it. And it's more about just asking questions. And when you ask questions, you come to find, in many cases, there's some personal things going on in their lives. There's some hardships, some challenges, maybe a death in the family that they didn't share, maybe some real struggle with their family, maybe they're contemplating divorce, you name it, I've heard it. But it was never my first reaction. When his calls went from 10 to 7, I never thought, maybe he's going through a divorce. That wasn't an automatic response. An automatic response was, you know, he's looking for another job maybe, or he just doesn't care anymore. But the thing is, when you begin to ask questions, you come to realize that you get answers that take you in a different direction. And now you actually have the information you need to properly engage. Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, to avoid sadness, to avoid drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. If you advance that slide, please. And the Bible did have a opinion about this. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion.
Ouch.
So if you find that in any dialogue, and I teach my reps the same thing even in a selling scenario, if you find in any dialogue where you're doing most of the talking, then ask more questions. Ask more questions. Because you're not getting the proper give and take, you're not getting the proper feedback, and maybe examine your goals and your intentions. Is your goal to just express your own opinion? Is your goal to just convince them of your opinion and that's it? Or is your goal to actually understand them? And even if your goal is to persuade them of your opinion, wouldn't it make sense to first understand what their opinion is? Which you probably didn't because you made an assumption. Right?
You got your button.
So I talk to my reps about this too. I say, you don't go into a house, if you're an electrician, you don't just walk in and start rewiring things. You have to first observe and figure out what the wiring is. And then you can make suggestions about how to make some augmentations or some changes. But you have to first understand what is before you could just walk in and try to change someone else's mind. But again, I'll go back to the beginning of the talk. Spend less time trying to change other people's minds. Spend more time trying to change your own mind. Based on the feedback I'm getting here and the laughter and the, oh my God, I can't believe, there's a lot of work to be done on just changing our own minds, let alone anyone else's. So let's just really focus on us for now. And then the final agreement is always do your best. I love this quote. It came from H. Jackson Brown, Jr. The best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today. Love that. Now here's the thing about your best that you have to really remember. Your best is going to change. It's not, every day you have a different best. Every moment you have a different best. When your blood sugar drops at 3 o'clock and you're tired, you have a different best. When you're hangry, you have a totally different best, right? When you first wake up in the morning, some people are morning people. Your best looks one way. Some people, you're not going to get their best until their second cup of coffee. So just be patient with yourself on this one, but recognize that you still have a best. Even in this situation, you still have a best to give. And whatever that looks like, be willing to give it. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstances, simply do your best and you'll avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. And again, the Bible does have something to say on this topic. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord. And that comes from Colossians. So think about that. Everything that came from the Toltec wisdom, we also saw from ancient Sufi wisdom. We also see it in our own Christian texts. These principles are universal. They work. And just like every principle, they work for you or against you. The question is, are we going to start to behave in a way that harnesses these principles to work for us, as opposed to blindly behaving in a way where the principles are working against us? Because the opposite of every one of these these agreements is negative. The opposite of every one of these agreements puts you in a position where you're off center, where you're off balance, where your buttons are being pushed, where you're constantly making judgments about people, where you can't even think straight anymore because there's so much information coming at you from so many different angles that it really has a mental health impact. It really does. People are really starting to get, if you have a little bit of anxiety, right now you have a lot. If you have a little bit of depression, right now you have a lot. If you had no depression at all, now you're getting a little depressed. I mean, everybody's moving on that scale. Anyone who's paying attention to what's going on is kind of moving on that scale. And we're in charge. We're in charge of our minds. Our minds are not in charge of us. Our media is not in charge of us. None of that is in charge. We're in charge of how we decide to move forward. We're in charge of our own mental health. We're in charge of behaving in a certain way in our society. We're in charge of us, but we're not in charge of anyone else, even our kids. I learned that lesson a long time ago too. They are not my property. They have their own minds, and they have to manage. So if I could teach them anything, it's this. Take good care to manage your own mind and your own thinking. Because I can't do that for you. I'm not handing you agreements from my childhood. I'm handing you this little book. Take it from there. So I'll just end with this idea that you can really change your life by changing a habit. That's what this talk is about. Because again, everybody's probably read this book. You probably read it and reread it. You may not have been able to name them all even. So that means there's work to be done. And the work that needs to be done is in the realm of changing a habit. And this may be a little teaser and a little cue up for my next talk, for my sequel to this talk. Because changing a habit, there's a lot of literature on it. A lot of literature on it, but I would invite you to look it up. Because if you wanted to implement these principles a long time ago and you still haven't, then you're probably challenged with the power of an old habit, and you're probably challenged with how to replace it with a new habit. So I ended with 2190. It takes 21 days to change a habit. So pick any one of these principles. Pick the one. I know some of you out there have already talked to me about this. I won't name names. They say these two principles are really getting me. Or these two agreements. I'm good with these two, but this one or this one. So the invitation here is everyone's probably got one that is more challenging than the other three. Choose that. Choose that and make this time you spent on Facebook Live this morning matter. Make this 40 minutes that you spent this morning matter, because otherwise it's just another talk. And then you go about your life, and by tomorrow you forget the 4 agreements again. You still can't name them. So commit to taking, just pick one of them, and decide which one am I going to really commit to a 21-day venture on really reminding myself. Put the agreement up on your refrigerator, put it up on your desk, put it on your laptop, wherever you have to put it to remind you that first you have to observe yourself doing the opposite of what the agreement says to do. So first it's about observation, and then it's about, I'm going to look at it a different way. So it all starts with catching your thought as it happens, so that you, oh, that's one of those, I just made an assumption. Oh, that's one of those, I just made an assumption. It might be 1,000 that day, if you really think about it. Or taking things personally. Oh, I just took that personally. I don't even know this person. I really don't even know them. I have 3,000 people on my Facebook feed, another 15,000 on my music page, and 95% of which I don't know. So why am I taking any of that personally? I have no idea. But I do. We all do. Right? So think about that. Just kind of think about the 21. And what is the 90? The 90 is after 21 days, if you've really made an impact, if you did your work, and you found yourself catching your thoughts, and you start replacing them, and now you're starting to almost get a natural flow to it, then focus on that and keep that alive for an additional 90 days. Because the habits that you have now have had, depending on your age, I'll just use my age, the habits that I have now have had a 58-year head start. Right? So 21 plus 90 is not a whole lot compared to 58 years, right? So think about that. The habits that you have now are very, very deeply ingrained. So take this really, really seriously. Put the time into it. Go the full course, and then move on to the next agreement. I would highly recommend that you just pick one at a time. Change one habit at a time. And over the course of a year, you will find yourself a completely different person that is free of buttons, that is very impeccable with their word, that is not taking things personally, that's not making assumptions, and that has trained themselves to always do their best in every situation. Pick one at a time. Devote the year to it. Don't even read another book. There's no need for any more wisdom until we've owned this. That's how I feel about it. Don't read another book. It's just another shiny thing that takes you on another venture, and you forget this. And that's why when somebody asks you if you can name the four, you forget one or two of them. Because we're chasing shiny stuff all the time. Embed these, embody these, become these, and it's amazing what can happen. So with that, I'm just going to go into